Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
Welcome back. This is Tim and Julie Harris, and we're here interviewing the great, the wonderful, the powerful Holly Mabery, who is the, guess what, broker of eXp Realty, Senior Vice President of Brokerage, I believe is what your title is, but we call her the broker. And so what we're going to be doing is talking about everyone's least favorite, but the most important topic in the real estate industry right now, which is the commission sharing, the ramifications of the commission sharing lawsuit and the practical, tactical application of that in your real estate practice. So we're going to be probably covering a lot of topics, but what you're going to listen to us focusing on primarily is how you're going to be presenting this information to your prospective buyers and sellers, how you're going to be presenting this information to fellow real estate agents who might not be, staying on top of the changes, but most importantly, how you're going to be presenting this information to buyers. So Holly, without any further delay, thank you for your time today. I know you're really busy.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here with you both. Thank you. So let's jump in. What do you got? Where do you want to start?
Well, so like I was saying prior to us starting the recording today, we would like to make this so that the boots on the ground agent trying to help their buyers after August 18th are doing it in compliance with the settlement agreements. And we can just start from there. So practically speaking, what has changed in the way that buyer agents are paid?
Such a good question. Okay, so basically, we've been so used to anything we pull up on the multiple listing service, MLS, we're going to get paid on. And we're used to seeing that co-broke offering. That goes away as of August 15th. And in some of your multiple listing services, even earlier. So what does this mean? How do you get paid before you go show? One of the requirements out of the NAR lawsuit and the settlement agreement says that you and I, before we open a door, we will have something in writing that says, hey, buyer, this is how I work. This is what I work for. And this is what I'm going to get paid at the end, should you decide to buy this property. Now that sounds really simple until you're standing in front of a buyer and they just want to see the house. And you're like, but sign here, because otherwise I'm going to get in trouble. This is what I would say. The first step I want you to take right now today is pull down the buyer broker agreement that you have either from your company or from your association. And I want you to get super familiar with it. My business partner and I always used to go to Taco Tuesday and we'd practice presenting these forms back and forth. And we would do it in such a conversational manner because walking up to the front door is a terrible time to present a buyer broker. You almost want to meet somebody in advance. Starbucks around the corner, maybe a Zoom call or a Google Meet, because you can share your screen and you're having a quick visit about, hey, what's important to you? What kind of agent do you need in your life right now? Like how do you want to work? And then from there, you can talk about the benefits of working with you and what it means to actually commit to somebody to open a door. Because the worst thing that a buyer could ever do right now is walk through the door unrepresented and tell somebody all of their negotiating needs, right? Like think of it this way. If I tell you, I've got to be in the school district by this date so my kid can make the football team. My husband has a new job and we're relocating. Oh my gosh, my spouse has this health issue and we've got to get closer to our kids. Those are all negotiating strategies. And as a result, if they're unrepresented, they just maybe lost thousands of dollars in negotiation strength. If you present that to a buyer in that way, they're like, nobody's ever told me that. Now you earn trust.
So what this ends basically, and Julie, you and I were just talking about this prior to me hitting record, was the Pop-Tart agents, agents that will get a call and go immediately show a house. So those days are over. So the formality that's going to be forced upon the industry and frankly upon consumers, it's going to be very shocking for a lot of home buyers who are used to basically being able to have agents just pop over and open up doors. And I would imagine, frankly, there's going to be a lot of agents that are going to just continue on that behavior pattern without necessarily having something formally assigned. So just so that I'm clear, Holly, those buyers that do, continue pop-tarting, they're going to be out of compliance, basically. Is that a fact?
So the buyer can pop tart as agents. If I get a call and I'm like, oh yeah, let me pop right over, happen to open that door, but I don't have something signed. And let's say it's a listing agent who then ends up, they've been working with that buyer or somebody else, and they're like, well, hey, how did you see the inside of this house? Oh, we called Holly last week. She showed it to us, et cetera, et cetera. Guys, procuring calls is gone. Like there's no more thing as far as procuring costs. But what can happen is if I'm trying to get a buyer's agent to sign up my buyer broker, and they're like, well, Holly didn't make us do it. If that occurs, that agent's most likely to turn me into the MLS and I could get fined. And this is the big challenge. We're seeing fines in MLSs ranging from $500 to $5,000 per instance. And many of them have adopted a 3 strikes and you're out rule. Like you could lose MLS services. So why go there? Have something super easy to sign and have a conversation in advance.
Well, this is what Julie, I mean, let me ask this question. Then Julie's got a great question. She just messaged it to me. So if you have a buyer that's not like, you're going to have a lot of buyers, I would imagine, that are used to working with agents as they have for generations, where they essentially can just, call somebody and they open the door. And that door, and now there's there has to be a form that has to be signed in essence. We can do it digitally. We can do a bunch of different ways. But I would imagine where the problem is going to be is not necessarily the agent not willing to be compliant, but the buyer not necessarily being willing to sign the document. And that might be, and this forces the whole transaction, or the whole process of working with the buyer to follow a more formal process, just like it has with listings all the time. Generate the lead, pre-qualify the lead, all the rest of it. So what we're going to have to do is start thinking of buyers as we've thought of sellers all along. I mean, if you have a seller that comes up just, rando seller that asks you to do all this work and prepare the CMA and the rest of it, you haven't spent the time to pre-qualify them, and it turns out they're just wanting the price just, for the heck of it. I mean, you wouldn't do that. So this is what this is where the sea change is the behavioral pattern. I imagine the most resistance is going to happen from the consumer side. Julie?
Well, I have 2 questions. I think we're all in agreement that the professionalism has to be raised to a whole new level, that the expectation is that you have the kinds of conversations that Holly was talking about. What are the things that are important to you sooner in the relationship? However, my question is, what about the case of the listing agent who really wants to show the property? The seller's wondering, why haven't you shown it more? The buyer's ready to go like this, but they don't have the relationship yet. What is the provision for maybe a one-time showing, non-exclusive, an in-between type of step where maybe they're all getting along, but the buyer's not quite ready to sign the exclusive? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, at what point and how will this actually be regulated? Will it be registered with the e-key? Will the listing agent ask for a digital copy of the agreement? At what point do we know that this has been done correctly?
Oh, I love these questions. Thank you. So first, we do need to make it frictionless for the client, right? Like if I'm going to start to work with somebody for the first time, I want to lead with education on how I'm going to take care of you. As an agent in the street, it's so important that we're relationship based at the end of the day. I'm going to earn your trust over the course of the next few months together, but I have to earn it in a really short window of like 5 minutes in conversation. And so to do that, the best way to earn that trust is with education. Just explaining simply the process. Super happy to show you this property. What it means to you is I get to do X. And if you should buy this house, because we all know usually buyers don't buy the first house they look at. They need to look at a couple of things. Okay, great. At our company at EXP, we've actually produced a single property buyer broker. And this is kind of that off ramp for buyers to be able to see one property, get to know the agent a little bit better, and see if it's a fit. And if it's not a fit, no harm, no foul. We've done compliance with the MLS. We've allowed the buyer to see what they wanted to see in the house, didn't quite fit, and we're not a match, to represent you. Good luck. We wish you all the best. That form, actually, we've made that available to anybody in the industry. And so if your brokerage allows it, you're more than welcome to use it. Now, what I would say is this, as far as enforcement, as a listing agent, I want people to sell my house. I'm not looking to enforce anything except the terms of the contract that we agree upon. So I'm going to trust you at your value that when you call to make an appointment on my listing, you have a signed by your broker. If you don't, you should get one. But at the end of the day, I want you to show my house and bring a buyer. That's all I'm worried about. Where I do see the enforcement coming, I don't want to see your buyer broker either. I don't think that should be a standard of practice because currently we don't have buyer's agents asking for copies of the listing contract. So why would we do the other? That's insane. So buyer broker agreement, that's a personal services contract between the agent and their client. It's none of my business as the listing agent.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And token, they are not responsible. Like, let's say I'm the listing agent and I allow you to show it and you don't have something signed or isn't the right form signed. It's not on me as the listing agent for having allowed you in the door, correct?
Not at all. There's no fine, there's no penalty. You're doing the best for your seller and getting people through the door, period. And that's what's important.
Okay, agreed.
So there's been a lot of talk about buyer agents trying to show their value and all the rest of it, and no one's really said what that is. Julie and I are actually coming out with a product. I'll show this to you, Holly, when it's done.
Yeah.
But this is a mock-up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to give agents essentially a turnkey program or product that they can give to prospective buyers. We've had this for sellers forever called pre-listing pack. So this is something to give to prospective buyers. It's a waterfall thing. There's 7 pages on each side. It's going to give all the USPs, unique selling propositions that agent's going to promise when working with that buyer. There's a communications guarantee. There's what exactly I'm going to do, the process of finding a home, like you just mentioned. There's all the things I'm going to do in addition to what everyone else does as far as looking for properties and all the rest of it. And the goal is when an agent gives that to their prospective buyer, we're going to, either in paper or digitally, that's going to act as their silent salesperson so that agent then can, frankly, maybe even use the package of information to answer all the heavy lift questions that they're avoiding. And the biggest one is, and if you don't mind just jumping into the deep end on this one, how commissions are paid. So yeah, that's where people are really getting nervous. That's where most of the questions from our podcast listeners and our coaching clients are coming from. How the heck am I going to present to my buyer the fact that they're legally going to be responsible for paying my commission? So I know you've gamed out, because you and I've talked about this, the different scenarios and how it might work. So what is the state of the art? What's EXP's stance on that now?
Well, let's break it down, right? Let's talk about the buyers you're likely to represent in the marketplace. Let's talk about our first-time home buyers. Maybe they're VA, maybe they're FHA. Usually they're cash poor, right? They're getting into their first house. What I would say when you're sitting to have them sign that buyer broker is, look, we've got a couple of different options for you. If you win Powerball tonight, cool, bring a bucket of money at close of escrow and you can pay me there. But if you don't, we've got 2 strategies to employ. The first is you can authorize me to call the listing agent and see if the seller is offering any buyer broker compensation. And if they are, fantastic. That offsets anything you and I agree upon here. And if they're offering more, I only get what you and I agreed upon, which is great. And I can negotiate for the balance to maybe go for you as concession. The second piece that we could do is I just write an offer on any house you want. And this is where I want to pause. You and I have done this for years, right? When we go show a house, somebody goes, oh my gosh, I love that washer and dryer. They're front facing, they're the right colors, they fit. We negotiate for the washer and dryer. We negotiate for home warranties. We negotiate for repairs. Why wouldn't we negotiate for this? It's just another piece of the puzzle. And so this is phraseology or terminology I would suggest. As a buyer's agent, you can say to your buyer, you can authorize me to ask for a concession in the contract. And the concession language looks like this: seller to credit buyer X at close of escrow to offset buyer's contractual obligation to buyer broker. Seller to credit buyer X, whatever that amount is, at close of escrow to offset buyer's contractual obligation to buyer broker. Now, this is what's cool, y'all. I didn't just make this up. We've been using this phrase in our contract language since probably about 2008, 2009. We all remember the short sales. Yeah, I use this a lot in short sales. And so as a result, it really helps because now we're negotiating. It's a credit to you, buyer. If there's an overage, great. Use it to buy down points, use it for your closing costs, whatever that might be. And then the final key as a buyer's agent is if, let's say the seller's only offering a portion of what you've agreed upon with your buyer. It's lesser, you're off by $500. You can always come down. You have that power to negotiate down. The opportunity is giving your buyers variety and giving them choice. We can always go to the seller and ask. And what's the worst they say? No? Or maybe they say yes or half. Like, oh my goodness, there's so many different ways. So as a first-time home buyer, I would look at that. If I'm representing somebody who's a move-up buyer or something along those lines, I may still go with those two different strategies of let's see what the seller will pay. Let's see what the seller is offering, because we're in an in-between time in many markets, especially price ranges. Some of the price ranges, sellers are like, yeah, I want to go. I've got things to do, sell my house. As a result, great, what are you willing to do? I can ask up front, and then I can ask again in the offer.
Julie, let's get into the weeds with what we were talking about yesterday. So if you don't, Holly's, I tip dropped this.
In regards to financing.
Yeah, right. So you can legally finance buyer agent commissions. There can be over the appraised price an additional 6% that can be used for, call it concessions. So
absolutely.
What you proposed, obviously, those are the two that doesn't involve having to deal with the buyer's financing, but assuming the buyer's financing and they're doing a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac mortgage, Holly, just think about this. It's kind of, obviously you're the broker, so tell me if I'm wrong on this. But the buyer, essentially the financing could be include above the appraised price, the concession for buyer agent's commission. And that's a 6% that the buyer that's sitting on top of every potential Fannie Freddie Mac that could be used for different concessions. 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%. It doesn't have to be less than what's traditionally been the going commission rate. It could be significantly more. And we think, and I think this is true, because I'm already talking to some of these agents, they're planning on actually doing exactly what I just proposed and raising their commission above what's the traditional, because they're planning on offering a hell of a lot more. Moving services. They're going to do all kinds of different staging things. They're going to pay for the home warranty. They're going to do all these other things. They're not going to chase the market down. They're going to essentially make their value proposition greater, and they're going to charge for it. And in many cases, like Julie and I ran scenarios on what that would mean to someone with a $450,000 mortgage, 20% down, 30-year AM at 6%. I know rates are higher than that, but it increases the payment by $54 a month. So yeah, essentially you get all these value adds over, and you're going to be in this house for 5 years. It's possible, Holly, and you're the broker again. I'm not the expert about this, so follow me on this one. Is why wouldn't a buyer, why wouldn't the buyer's agent be able to, remember we're dealing with $54 a month. Why wouldn't the buyer's agent be willing to be legally able to credit back to the buyer at closing, let's say 3 years worth of that additional, say $600 a month or $600 a year?
I think anything is possible as we go forward. What we've seen out of the GSEs, Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie Mae, is they believe that the buyer's fee, the buyer broker fee, was always wrapped as part of the contract price. Okay, great. So we've already seen that, and we've already seen VA come out and say, look, we believe it's part of the contract price. We believe it will be wrapped in, and many times it will be paid for by the seller. The market ebbs and flows. You guys know this better than anybody. The market ebbs and flows, and as a result, how we communicate with folks as far as their options is the key in all of this. So if I'm a buyer right now, I want to see what the seller's willing to do, and I want to see what's possible. If I'm a seller in this market, I may say, yeah, I'm willing, but I want to see your offer. I want to negotiate. I want to negotiate strategy. I may pay more because, hey, I'm a veteran and I'm so willing to pay for an agent for a veteran. That's fantastic. Like everybody, this kind of opportunity, I think for the consumer to really drive what's important to them is key in all of this. And so if I can find a bright spot as we look at kind of all of the change that's happening and the consternation, it's truly around the client gets to choose and they get to make it very personal to them.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, legislation aside and the consternation, as you just said, aside, fundamentally, this does improve the real estate industry because it's gonna raise the bar for buyer agents. The buyer agents that don't develop the skill set and know how to really vocalize the process and their value proposition, they're not going to be in business. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing because it's going to make everyone get better. But I want to take a half step back because this is
Sure.
something you were just saying too, which I think is really interesting. And Julie and I have been in the business for over 30 years. I think you've been in the business as long. So it's normal in a normal market where you would write an offer on behalf of you using an example as a first-time buyer, which is a great example, where let's say the house was $400,000, the seller's not going to take it any less, but the buyer is let's just say they have closing costs and other fees. They could pay over 400. So they could, I'm saying this not for your sake,
Yeah.
obviously, I'm saying it for the sake of the listeners. They could, they know their closing costs and all their fees are 410, 10,000. So they're going to offer that seller $10,000 over the asking price, and the seller's going to net the same. So when someone hears about these concessions going on top of the asking price, so the buyer stays competitive and they pay the buyer agent's fee, the seller's going to net the same. So folks need to get that in their heads because as they're hearing us talk, I know most agents who haven't experienced a more, a market like this, they don't realize that that's traditionally the way that the business has always been done.
For sure. I think a couple of things here to kind of unpack what you just explained. If I'm a listing agent going out to take a listing this afternoon, we talk a lot about listing in ranges, right? So you may have your wholesale price, you may have your retail with some repairs, and you may have your premium, which is all the repairs, top class, all of the things, but you're giving ranges. We are preparing or should be preparing at every range that we promote to a listing agent or a listing seller, their net sheet, right? Like that approximate what it might be, but also recognizing, and this was a tool that I always loved doing with my sellers was, okay, who's our buyer? Who are we going to see walk through that door? Who's our most likely buyer? Are they going to be first time? Are they going to be FHA? Like what kind of loan? Are they getting cash? Like depending on where we are priced, that's going to dictate. And so as a result, our price points and our net sheet go hand in hand because if I'm expecting at this price point, FHA financing or VA financing, maybe even USDA, depending on what market you're in, okay, now I need to plan. Somebody's going to be asking for something, some sort of concession. They're going to need help with the termite inspection. Maybe you've got a septic tank, all of that. Great. We're going to prepare for that. If I'm at that bottom barrel, as far as, I just need it gone and it's an investor special, fantastic. Those folks are cash. I'm not giving you any more of a discount and I'm not paying anything. It's a mindset shift. Now, what if exactly what you were doing, Tim, you start to do that with your buyers? What is the cost of ownership, the true cost of ownership? A lot of times buyers will get their truth in lending statement from the lender. What does it cost to get the loan? Well, let's talk about the long-term cost of ownership. And you and Julie started to lay that out of, well, what does it cost you to afford me? What am I going to save you in the long run? And so as a buyer's agent, I've got 3 things I want you to think about right now. The first is think about all the buyers that you've helped in the last year. On average, how much money did you save them? In closing costs, negotiations, what did you do? What was the average per transaction? And have that at the ready. Then I want you to look at how long did it take you to help your buyer find the right property from the time you started working with them to writing that offer. How long did it take? Because that's a beautiful stat. Time is money for many folks. And if you can start to articulate that, it's really powerful. And then the final is, what are the 3 strategies that you love employing on every offer you write? Do you always look for, hey, what is the seller willing to leave with the house? You know, what are concessions? Is it time or money, right? A lot of sellers may need to stay in the house longer, but they're willing to take less in a purchase price, or maybe they need to sell really fast, so they'll take less, like that time and money mindset. And so when you're a buyer's agent, I have that at the ready, the 3 things you can count on from me. And this is what historically I've been able to do for my clients. If you show up in that way over the course of the next 3 months with any buyer you come across, you're going to be days ahead of the average buyer out there or buyer's agent, because they haven't developed that muscle yet.
We're
So it's just
including
an opportunity.
we're including that in this new product because what you're saying
Yes.
is that, well, it's because it mirrors essentially what we've been teaching listing agents to do forever. And you know this too, right? When you're in a competitive situation, you want to be able to show your days on the market versus the average in the marketplace. You want to show your list to sell price ratio versus the average in the marketplace. You want to show all those types of things so that when someone's making an informed decision, and that's, you know, you're getting to it. And I love this, Holly, is that the buyer's agents are going to have to start. Julie said this a long time ago. It's in our book. Like, working with buyers is physical labor, working with the sellers is mental labor. Well, guess what? Now working with buyers is both physical and mental labor, because really a lot of buyer work in the past, you had to be knowledgeable at the marketplace. You had to be a good people person, but for the most part, the house was going to sell itself.
Yeah.
And and now working with sellers, working with listings, way more complicated, way more skills based, all the way from lead generation to, getting them to want to list with you. Now that level of skill is going to be necessary on the buyer side. Julie, I can tell when she does this, she has a question.
Yes, I agree. And I think we're having a great discussion. I hope that our listeners are picking up lots of, very, salient points. One of the things that I really hear, Holly, as you were talking about showing the value in a very specific way, the talking point has been, you have to articulate your value. How many articles have we seen where it's all about articulating your value? That's like the buzz phrase, right? But you're talking about in a very specific monetary way, in a time efficiency manner. And so what I was thinking as you were speaking, and Tim, as you were translating to agent as well, is that buyer's agents are going to have to become much more fluent in talking about money. And that's something that's been baked in before. Tim and I were talking last week, why is it that those conversations were more normal on the listing side? It's because the seller, they were thinking about that commission is coming out of my equity. That's coming out of my proceeds. That was much more tangible than the buyer who was just excited about finding a house because they weren't really out of pocket in their mind, right? So I think that the financial fluidity of those conversations has to be upgraded. And there's a lot of agents that are not yet comfortable doing a seller's net sheet. And in this case, even doing a buyer's net sheet, as you were saying, Holly, what's the long-term, investment in this purchase for you? So I think for me, from our coaching, I've been doing a lot of work making sure that agents are able to explain a seller's net sheet and a buyer's net sheet, that potentially it's not just your down payment, but you might have a little bit of out of pocket expense there. We used to do that with our buyers because we would have one section that was paid at closing and another section where we talked about, hey, your home inspection is out of pocket. That's not coming out of closing. So I think that some of this is the quality of conversation has to be upgraded, and the comfort level of agents having those conversations. I think, that's some of their consternation. So that's on one hand. The other question I had for you, because as Tim was talking about the possibility of rolling the buyer side fee into the price, and demonstrating that would be a concession after closing. Do you know how will there be, and maybe it's state by state or MLS by MLS, but I'm thinking about comparable sales. Am I going to see that there was one big concession of $15,000, or will it be, okay, of that 15, 5 of it went for an agent concession, 5 went to closing costs, and 5 went to repairs? What's your take on that?
Or even worse, it just shows the final price and it doesn't break out the concessions.
I think we're going to see all of the above. In watching MLS rules nationally, we've got some MLSs who are saying yes, no on concessions in advance, right? Like, seller is willing to offer concessions, yes, no. Some are saying yes, no, and then giving buckets of what the sellers will offer as far as actual amounts. And that gives me a little bit of concern, but that's another conversation. I think what we will see at closing is what we have traditionally seen in most MLSs. Were there concessions? Yes. How much were the concessions? And I think we will likely see in most MLSs a range or a dollar amount. I don't know that it's going to break out buyer side, closing costs, termite, new flooring, all of that kind of thing. I think we'll have to wait and see the evolution over the next six months, couple of years, because MLS moves a little bit slower. When you look at these field changes in the technology, it takes a while to do that. And that was one of the reasons we saw a lot of, we were supposed to be doing this change mid-July. It's happening mid-August. And basically because MLSs had to change, our forms had to change as an industry, it just took longer.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, ultimately, and this is going back to, thinking about talking to a seller, you have a seller who says, I'm not going to pay a buyer agent commission. Maybe you were in a competitive listing situation and the other agent you're competing against, told the seller that, you don't have to pay a buyer agent commission. They were not informed about the different ways the buyer agent commission can be paid. And they use that as a kind of a USP to try to get the listing, right? So the seller is going to have it in their mind. I don't want to pay a buyer agent commission. Well, if there's a way to show, well, Mr. Seller, listen, I understand and I appreciate the fact you want to pay a buyer agent commission. It's a lot of money. There's no two ways about it. But what if paying a buyer's agent commission in the form of a concession meant that you actually netted more than if you didn't? And would you still want to not pay it? And they'll most likely say, well, I'd want to pay it, but you have to prove it to me. In which you pull out the MLS statistics and you see here are the last 10 comparable sales. And you can see here was the price, here were the concessions. Hopefully there's going to be a carve out for the buyer agent commission. And you can see these properties sold with a list to sell price ratio was the days in the market was. And you can see these houses actually sold for a higher percent in fewer days in the market. Mr. Seller, do you think it's reasonable to expect that incentives matter when it comes to selling anything? And the incentives that those other sellers offered resulted in a better result for that seller? Maybe we should consider doing the same thing. Oh, and by the way, these last houses, they're still for sale. And they've been for sale for over 6 months.
Or expired.
Yeah. I think we're going to see all of it. I think what becomes really important, again, goes back to our communication. Are we allowing the client to make the ultimate decision? Because I think that one of the reasons the lawsuit came about is there was a perception that we had taken something away from a decision-making point by the sellers in offer of compensation to a buyer broker. Okay, we're fixing that. And so I think the opportunity for really good professional practitioners in this new market is to continue to accentuate their positive, which is communication, simple explanation, and walking people through forms and negotiating strategies. I think anytime you can sit down and have that strategy session with a client on either side, buyer or sell, oh my gosh, you're going to be so much further ahead.
Yeah, for sure. It's less about sales skills. It's more about, seeing yourself as what you truly are, which is a consultant. You're a counselor. You're a coach to the buyer or the seller. Stop thinking in terms of I'm here to sell something and think of I'm here to help somebody. I'm here to help solve their problem.
For sure. You said it earlier, Tim, the house sells itself.
Yeah.
Right. At the end of the day, the product will always sell itself. It's removing those obstacles to help people make the best decision for themselves. They may say, oh, that property's it. How do they get there? And that's our opportunity as professionals.
And it's cool too, Holly, is that in this time where we said this on the podcast today, so I have it ringing in my head, the greatest fortunes of men and women have always been made during the greatest times of change. And we do agree with you 100% that it's going to take 90 days, 6 months, maybe a year for this to all sort out, for things to start to feel normal again. But in that intervening time, there are going to be new kings and new queens of the real estate markets crowned because they embrace the change. That's what Julie Harris says, right? It's in her book again. Knowledge equals confidence, ignorance equals fear. So Julie, how does that relate to what's going on in the market right now? More than ever, right?
Well, I mean, I fear for the agents that don't have the knowledge, clearly. And you can see some of the crazy stuff posted online on virtually an every minute basis, that there still is a great need. And that's why I'm so happy that we're doing this Zoom with you, Holly. there's such a need to understand at all in the first place. What are the new requirements? That this is not optional. I've seen agents arguing online, well, I'll just opt out of NAR and I don't have to comply. You know, it's all of this misinformation and confusing things. So on one level, it's just even understanding what you're supposed to do and processing that. And then taking that knowledge and turning it into confidence that, okay, I get it now. If I do A, B, and C, and I have, like, Holly, your waterfall situation, you've got this strategy and this strategy, we'll figure out which is best for you, giving them the options and being transparent. So that knowledge should equate to confidence. Ignorance should equal fear, especially in this case, because it's no longer optional. You're going to be out of compliance. And I'm glad that you mentioned that this is a real thing and that there are fees between $500 and $5,000. I think that we go through a couple of that and fines, sorry. And people will become very sober on the situation. So I think it's a real thing that knowledge equals confidence and ignorance equals fear. We're going to have to go through all of this together. And I think that there's going to be a big learning process. And then we have another complication that not every state and every broker has exactly the same forms and the same principles. I wanted to ask you something I don't think that we've talked about yet. And that is the instance where a listing agent does come across that unrepresented buyer who has decided that they understand and maybe their best friend is a fantastic agent. They see their value, but gosh, they're just not comfortable committing in writing. Maybe I just don't have that, say, $15,000 to commit to. I'm not comfortable with that. I feel like I can go to the listing agent myself. So now I, the unrepresented buyer, go to that listing agent. The listing agent has, in some cases, the state or the brokerage says no dual agency for you. It's not even an option. What is your take on dual agent versus not dual agent? And maybe that listing agent has something in their contract, in their seller's contract, their listing contract that says, if that happens, I'm going to do more work. I'm not really representing the buyer, but I am putting the deal together. In that case, I'm going to raise my fee by 1%, 1.5%, or a flat fee on top of that. What is your take on that?
Sure. So that was absolutely a scenario that we planned for in our listing agreement that we drafted for the company. And I'm seeing that in some states. California Realtors did it the same way. What I think is important in anytime you go to work with a client, and especially on the seller side, you should be able to sit down with them and say, okay, seller, do you want me to show your house? And if I show your house, these are the things that could happen. I could end up representing that buyer, which means in our state, and name your state, and then is it dual agency? Is it transaction? Is it, oh my gosh, designated agency? If it's dual agency, I'm now limited in what I can share with you. If the buyer tells me their motivation and I have a signed agreement with them to represent them, but also you, I can't tell you why the buyer is buying, just as I can't tell them why you're selling, right? That could speak to price and time. So seller, are you okay if I show the house? And some sellers, I've had some sellers say no. And they're like, but when are you going to have an open house? And I kind of giggle and I'm like, well, I can have an open house, but everybody that comes through, most people have open houses because they're looking for buyers to sell something else to. So do you want me to sell your house? Or do you want me to find buyers to go sell something else about? What's important to you? And those are conversations to have with the seller. In our listing agreement, we actually provided for, I represent you, but we know some buyers in this marketplace are going to go directly to the listing agent. When that happens, I'm probably not going to represent them. I've got a listing right now and I've told the seller, I'm not going to represent a buyer. I'm actually not even going to show the house. So I'm going to send any sign calls to other people, some with my company, some without. And he said, okay, that's great. I'd prefer you not represent anybody else. Perfect. This is what we'll do. If that client or if that customer comes and says, I don't want to represent anybody else, I want to work directly with you. I'm an agent from 100 years ago. Just give me the paperwork and I'll go. Cool. Seller, I'm going to charge you extra because I have more liability. I'm going to do more work. You talk about the hustle, Julie, as far as the more physicality, as far as getting something sold. Yeah, I just signed up for all of that and more, taking on that unrepresented buyer. And so we do have an unrepresented customer form within EXP. I know a lot of states are producing it as well. make sure you have them sign that in advance of signing any contractual paperwork, because the minute you produce that contract, they think that you're working for them, and then you slide that form in. Nah, that's not gonna work. You want to lead with who you represent and how before you sign a contract.
Julie, let's use a coaching client and an EXP agent and the number one agent. And what's this province? Quebec, is it?
Canada, in Ontario. Yeah.
Ontario, yeah. John Walkinshaw.
Yeah.
So I had John on the pod a couple weeks ago. He's been coaching with Julie forever and a day. So John said in his marketplace that it's been normal, exactly what you just said, but I really want to drill down so people can open their minds to this. They're signing a listing contract. I'm going to throw out numbers. It's going to be a 3% listing or whatever it is. And then in the event that I have to work with an unrepresented buyer, I'm not going to be a dual agency. Matter of fact, I think dual agency is illegal in his province, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to represent that buyer. I am going to have to take on additional liability and work. So the commission is going to go from this to this. And that's actually part of the listing contract. And that's the way they've been doing it in Canada in his marketplace for years and years and years. Matter of fact, talking with him, Holly, he was like, what the heck are you guys worried about? We've been doing it this way forever, right?
And it's so crazy when you talk to anybody in our global network at EXP, they're like, yeah, this is no big deal. Australia, when the settlement came down, they're like, we got you. What do you need? And so that's what I appreciate is while it's big change for us here in the US, we've seen real estate continue to move forward. People need a place to live and they need a trusted advisor to get them that best property for their family. So why not do that? And I think that anytime we can educate ourselves to educate the client in a way that's simple without legalese and all of this kind of extra, oh my gosh. People trust people that speak cleanly and plainly. So why not be that person?
Absolutely. Doesn't it feel to you that after a certain amount of time, this really will settle down and just feel normal? Consumers will essentially be more familiar with the process. Agents will feel more familiar with the process. You know, it's funny. Our older coaching clients are having more of an issue with this because they've always done business the other way, agents with their teams and whatnot, than the new agents. The new agents are like, okay, tell me what to do. So it's kind of an interesting, you know, education and experience gap where maybe the experience is working against you. So Julie, any other thoughts? I could tell you were.
Well, I so appreciate your time, Holly, and sharing this Zoom with us, because we all need to work together to provide the leadership and give these guys the confidence to move forward and to not live in fear. I wonder how many transactions didn't happen in the past 30 days and going forward another 30 days because they're just kind of waiting to see how it goes and, you know, waiting to see what their broker says. And, you know, waiting is not a business plan. Waiting is not a strategy. Getting in front of this and taking action and having confidence and following a system, following a plan is so critical. And we very much appreciate your leadership on that. We appreciate your experience and, you know, I'm sorry, I hadn't met you before and I was asking Tim, I said, you know, it sounds like she's sold before, right? And you can so tell, right? Because even like your reference to some of the practices from the recession and the housing crash and dealing with short sales, that, you know what, that was a huge shift as well. And we all dealt with it and we all got through that and we lived to sell another house. So I really appreciate your experience and your time that you've spent, because, you know your stuff, and I so appreciate EXP's leadership on this as well with the different forms that have been made universal. Assuming your broker allows it and that sort of thing. So thank you. And Tim and I had a podcast on this, that we were so excited about these changes that we really sincerely think that this is a positive change. Not, I mean, obviously for consumers, for home sellers and buyers, but also for agents.
Yeah,
I'm excited that professionals get to show up in a different way.
Yes.
I reflect back on the short sale market, and that was such a professionals market that people saw our value and we're so grateful and appreciative. And that's what I see today. I want to encourage everyone. We've already seen some states change over requiring the buyer broker. Washington was first at the beginning of the year. Iowa and Indiana happened July 1st. And just this week, we saw New Jersey. The world kept turning, the lights stayed on, and transactions still happened. And so as a result, like you all say this so well in your book, don't let fear stop you. Keep moving forward. explain, get comfortable with the forms. It's a little bit different, but you can do this.
Well, Holly, you are a fantastic leader at EXP. You've always been very responsive to helping everybody. And she said the most important thing of our 45 minutes or so together. There is such a huge backlog of potential buyers and sellers in the marketplace right now. There's so many in some markets. What was it, Julie? We talked about this today on the show. It was like some of the hottest markets, there's like a 10 years backlog of unbuilt homes. In other words, they have to, there's so much unmet need for what's the demand is, and that's not going to change. That's not going to change anytime soon. So even if this might be one of the most challenging markets in the history of real estate in terms of overall home sales. That's what it looks like it's tracking for, less than 4 million home sales, not including new construction. But that's not a downward trend. That's just there's going to be a huge bounce back that's going to happen. And so I hope agents, I hope you guys wake up and realize there's nothing to be fearful of as long as you have the knowledge. So get the knowledge, get it as fast as possible. Stop going to all these little places online and getting little bits of this, little bits of that, that's going to lead you in wrong directions. Holly just gave you a brilliant, hopefully all three of us did a brilliant job of explaining to you how to rewire your brain. And Holly, credit to you and EXP for doing such a phenomenal job of leadership in the entire brokerage industry by actually spending a lot of money and time producing forms, and you're giving them away to every brokerage who wants to use them, because a lot of the MLS forms out there, Julie and I've been seeing them from coaching clients, they are confusing as hell. And a lot of times in the form, they contradict each other. This, except this. It's like, what? Try to explain that to a consumer. Your forms are simple. I love it.
Yeah, no, we took the Consumer Federation of America, and this was a watchdog group that actually was very pro-consumer in the late 2019s. And what they did is they actually got the truth in lending statements changed, right? So the settlement statement, the upfront, like consumers could actually understand what it was going to cost them to get a loan. That was the group that did this. They published a white paper back in February, and we took it to heart as a company. And our entire brokerage ops leadership, we sat down and went, all right, we're going to write a better buyer broker. How do we do that? And I'm very proud that we were able to. In fact, we wrote the single property and then also the buyer broker. And that group came out and said, great job, guys, way to go. And I will share with you, they just did the same on our listing agreement. They're like, all right, you have set the bar and you have not made it unreasonably high. So well done. So
it's 2 pages. The listing agreement is 2 pages. It's not, I've seen some that Julie and I've been emailed that are like, it's a book. It's ridiculous. I mean,
no, we got to make it easy for the consumer so you can have a better conversation. That's what this is about.
It's about helping people accomplish their goals of buying and selling real estate. That's it. We're in a people helping business. So we certainly appreciate you being in alignment with our highest and truest purpose. And it's clearly yours as well, which is being of service to other people, especially people in the real estate industry. So Holly, thank you very much for being our guest on today's podcast.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you. So Julie, we just finished the interview with Holly, and as I promised you, she's a really brilliant lady. She's such an approachable.
She's great.
Yeah, she is. It's funny. It's obvious she sold real estate, right? So what did you learn from that interview? What were your big takeaways?
Well, one of the things that she said towards the end there was it's important for agents when they're presenting and having these conversations to use clean and plain speech. I think that was a big takeaway for me because there's just been so much confusion about this and so many people posting what ifs. What if this scenario and what if that scenario and what if you're in this state and that state and the buyer says this and the seller says, just cut through it and have clean and plain conversation. Understand how to talk about numbers and finances and a buyer's net sheet and a seller's net sheet. And, the thing that I think agents have to realize is that, of course, not every buyer scenario is going to be the same. And not every, scenario for each buyer is going to be the same. So this house we show this afternoon is going to have this set of circumstances and it's going to work for you or it's not. If it doesn't, then this house we're going to see tomorrow might have a different set of circumstances. So one of Holly's points was that you've got to have that conversation. It could go one of these 1, 2, or 3 different ways. If it goes this way, we'll do this. If it goes this way, we'll try that. And to have confidence that you know what direction you can take that client in and not feel like, I think agents have this anxiety. They're trying to make everything this cookie cutter thing that this is how it's going to be. It's not going to be like that. Every scenario is different and you need to be able to present, you need to be able to show your value, explain that. And every now and then you're going to have a buyer that's not down with that and you have to be okay with it.
So practically speaking, the lead generation of the buyer. So Julie and I were thinking in terms of like, it's a 5-step buyer process. I'm going to show this again, but don't hold this
Sure.
against viewers because I know it looks like crap.
Mhm.
But basically, this is our mock-up of what's going to be the heart and soul of our ethical real estate professional designation. And basically, it's going to be ethical real estate professional designation buyer specialist. And the gist of it is that we're going to teach you how to handle all the different scenarios that you're going to be faced with, from the different things we just talked about with Holly and a hell of a lot more things that we didn't even have time to talk about. But the heart of it is going to be a folder that you're going to present to your prospective buyers. And on each side, waterfalled, which means that the pages are different size. I mean, it sounds silly that I'm even explaining this, but trust me, getting the pages to all be formatted correctly.
Yeah.
I mean, our team is doing it, but just it's a huge job. So we're going to give this is going to be part of the package, and you're going to give this to them. It's going to be a folder. It's going to have your name on it. It's going to have all the USPs that you're going to offer. What does that mean? So here's what Julie and I know, for having been in the coaching business for over 20 years, is that it's a very, very rare agent that's actually going to take the time to learn our material at the highest level. I mean, unfortunately, that's the truth. So we have to, when creating products for you guys, we have to create a product that's going to do the heavy lifting for you. So if you were to, I don't know if you can see this, listeners, but you'll be able to see it in the real form soon, the actual form that our graphics team is working on. But we're going to have something in there about, you're going to have your basic, obvious things, your resume. We're going to have something in there about your exclusive guarantee. Like, we're going to suggest all of you and coach you guys, and as part of this designation, to offer a guarantee to the buyers that if they're not 100% satisfied with the property after 24 months or 12 months or 6 months or whatever, you'll sell it for them for free. In other words, you won't charge a listing commission. This is all going to be stuff we're going to include in this. Why would you want to offer that? Julie and I offered it when we sold real estate. We had 0 people ever take us up on it. And all of our coaching clients, who have been, thousands and thousands of coaching clients, 0 people have ever taken them up on it as well. But the thing is it creates an extra, layer of professionalism and value, showing your confidence that you're going to find them the right house. Another page is, and this is going to be really important, it's called your proven home finding plan. You listen to our podcast, hopefully, and you know that we talk a lot about this, that you don't want to, if you're just rolling into a relationship with a buyer and you're telling them you're going to look in the MLS, you're going to do, these basic things.
I'll put you in a drip.
Yeah, put you on a drip, right? Who wants to be dripped on? So what you're going to do is you're going to show them all the things, and there's a lot of things that you can do to help them find a house. And again, we talk about this in our podcast every single day, but you want to take those things and and we've already done it for you. You want to list them out so they can see when they're holding that, they're going to see that you're not just doing what they can do, basically, which is looking into the MLS. They're going to see that you're doing all this extra work, that you're working with notice of default, so you're working with probate attorneys, that you're working with any for sale by owners, that you're working with builders, that you're working with all the things. And they're going to want to also know, in some cases, maybe you have a very particular buyer. This will be in a very particular neighborhood. Well, you're going to actually go out and door knock in those particular neighborhoods for those particular houses that match that particular buyer. And you'll be shocked how frequently you can, match that buyer to that prospective listing. You explain all these things, you're going to have no problem getting the buyers to sign those contracts and want to work exclusively with you. We have, again, there's 14 pages to this. I won't go through every page, but we have something called the buyer representation explained. That should be self-evident what that is. Client testimonials, your home buying team, mutual agreement, compensation, all these things. So what we've done, and what we're in the process of doing, I should say, is Julie and I are creating a turnkey solution to your fears about this change. What we want to have happen is you to generate the leads like you have been, and then give this information to the prospective buyer. Have the prospective buyer review the information prior to meeting with you, maybe even prior to seeing a house with you, ideally. And then if they have any lingering questions, which they probably won't, because this thing is going to act as a silent salesperson for you, they're just going to sign the agency form, the exclusive agency form, a sample buyer net sheet. And they're also going to sign some of the added things that we're going to give you that act as your unique selling propositions, your exclusive guarantees and things like that. So they're going to realize when working with you, because you took the time to explain things and give them this folder, frankly, that you are not a normal agent. You're somebody that's far more professional. Now, what I want you to realize is there's a lot to learn. There's a lot that you can trip over, but if you use this information, if you use the information as we're going to train you to use it, you're going to be able to give it to them. They're going to read what it is, read why it's important to them, and read why they then should work with you. So we're very excited about it if you can't tell. By the way, you need to get on the list for this product because what we're going to be doing is releasing 100 of these probably every 45 or 60 days. In other words, we're going to allow 100 agents to buy this designation with all the material, scripts, pre-qualification scripts, the buyer agent presentation, all the things, every 100 days, every 30 to 45 days. Why? Because it's a coaching program. And frankly, a lot of you are going to have questions and we don't want to overwhelm our coaching staff. So 100 are going to join, and then we're going to close the doors to the program. And then maybe 30 to 45 days later, the program, the actual coaching is going to be 30 days worth of coaching. Then after those people graduate, then we're going to open the doors again. So that's how it's going to work. So you want to get on the list first. Absolutely do this right away. Text the word buyer, BUYER to 47372. Text the word buyer, BUYER to 47372. And when the product is done, you will be the first that's going to get an invitation to, and we're going to text it to you to click the link, obviously, and then you can then, get early access to the program. What are you thinking, Jules?
Well, so one of the main reasons that we've created this for you is that we know that when you're woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning, we call that the 3 a.m. real estate night sweats, and you're thinking about these changes. Usually the fear comes in, they asking for that signature. And now it's not optional. You're going to be out of compliance if you don't have it. Then we know that that's what you're worried about. And we know that for some of you, you had tried that before it was a requirement. And maybe it wasn't that comfortable for you. You decide not to do it because, the buyer just said, well, it's not for me, right? So here's the thing. What we've created for you are the scripts, the guarantees. It's the thing that you're searching for is, and you've heard it all over, since the settlement went down, you've got to show your value. You've got to articulate why somebody would sign that agreement with you. This is the piece that you've been looking for that shows you A, B, C, D, and E. This is exactly why I have value to you. It's the 20 things I do other than the MLS that'll find that house that you're looking for. It's the satisfaction guarantee. It's all of these things, okay? So that is what you're looking for. And remember that the thing that you fear, getting the signature, you're closing, you're asked, that's your big close, right? The definition of a close is the logical ending to a great presentation. Some of you have been freaking out because you didn't have the great presentation. We're taking care of that for you. We're not just giving you, the ideas, write down this, you need to do that. No, you already know all of that. We've actually written it down. We've presented it for you. We've done everything except meet with that prospective buyer for you, okay? And so you've got guarantees, you're showing your value, and then the big scary close becomes easy because the buyer's excited to sign with you. They can't believe, that they wouldn't sign. There's people that don't do that. Of course I'm going to do that. When can we go see a house together? We're taking away the fear, the trepidation, the nervousness, not just for you, but for maybe buyers that have been reading some of these headlines and they're not sure what they're supposed to do or how they're supposed to act. We're creating something so that you can be the leader and you can have a logical presentation that ends in a smooth signature. And then maybe next weekend they'll be in contract, you'll be working together and everything is smooth, easy peasy. That's what our goal is for you.
And if you don't do this, what's going to happen is you're going to be meeting with buyers. Maybe you think you're going to get away with not having an exclusive contract signed, not advisable, right? There's going to be fines associated with that, as Holly said on our interview. But you don't want to be in a situation where you're tripping over what to say and how to say it, because you're going to create nothing but nervousness in that buyer.
Or worse, you won't have the conversation at all because you're so nervous that you avoid that, you just say, oh, I'm only going to take the easy deals that I know they love, trust me, and those are your 3 deals for this year. That's not going to work for you. You're not going to be able to dodge this for long. So you might as well embrace it, get really good at it, get really confident at it. And then you'll find that you have all of the business and you're getting all of the referrals because you did such a killer job.
So when Julie and I were selling real estate, and we've had our coaching clients have this thousands of times, here's how we're going to jump in the time machine, but I think all of you will appreciate this. I know you will. So Julie and I got to the point where we were selling 100 to 200 homes per year consistently. We sold over 100 homes our first year in real estate when we were in our early 20s. That's how a lot of you know us or remember us. So it got to the point where, our listings were sometimes far apart, like an hour apart. And that's some of you are living that life now. It's not easy to have any kind of life when doing all that driving around. So we ended up having to hire a listing specialist to work with us. Her name was Lisa. Now, Lisa was as charming as the day was long, but did not have a lot of real estate experience, had basically no experience working with sellers. But Julie and I, there's only so many listing appointments we can go on and be effective. I mean, sometimes I was going on 3 a day, and the last one, let me tell you, I was calling it in because I was just tired. But what I began to realize when I was on those appointments was that the appointment itself didn't have to last much more than 15 minutes because the seller really didn't care about 99% of the things that, frankly, I was taught that they would care about. They don't care about my dog. They don't care about my awards. They care about what they care about. And so when we hired Lisa, I started thinking, how can Julie and I make something for Lisa that will make it so that she can convert as many of those appointments to actually sign listing contracts as we do? We're close. And, a few generations later, it took us about a year when we came out with our pre-listing package. And our pre-listing package for Lisa, it was essentially like the silent salesperson. She would send it out ahead of time prior to the listing appointment. There's a whole bunch of information in there. Hey, Julie, I just thought of something we need to include in the buyer product. The questions to ask when interviewing other buyer agents. Yes. All right.
Yeah.
So she would use that ahead of time. When she got to the listing appointment, the seller was pretty much always already convinced. You add in her charm. Now she's got the contract signed. It took her after she was using the final iteration of our pre-listing pack for sellers, it took her probably 30 to 45 days. And her appointment to sign contract ratio was the same as mine. Now that's amazing. Okay. So you'd think, well, it's a Tim and Julie team member. They're not going to be able to convert as many sellers to sign listings. No, it's not true. It was the pre-listing pack doing the work for them. This is exactly what we've created for all of you on the buyer side of things. So for generations, buyers agents, it was working with buyers has mostly been physical labor. You didn't have to have frankly, some of the uncomfortable conversations you do with sellers. Like sellers, want to talk about commissions. They want to talk about net. They want to talk about why should I list with you versus somebody else. They want to talk about all the things that make virtually everyone nervous, especially if they're not prepared. Those same conversations are coming your way fast and furious on the buyer side of the transaction now. So that's the reason Julie and I've created this silent salesperson for you. So it's all the things we talked about. That's what this buyer program is going to be. In addition to that, we're going to give you our scripts. So scripts on what to say and how to say it when working with buyers to help them find a home quickly and efficiently that meets most, if not all, of their needs. And what you're going to discover is that our buyer system is a complete A to Z solution for individual agents, for teams, for brokerages, and it does handle all the fears that you have about the difficult conversations that are inevitable because of the changes to the commission sharing as a result of commission sharing, but it's also going to keep you in compliance. And so that's what we're really excited about. So the list is going to work just like I described. We're going to be selling, and it is selling, we're going to be releasing 100 of these designations. It's going to be called Ethical Real Estate Professional. We're releasing 100 in the next probably 60, what is today's date, Julie? And next probably 30 to 45 days. And then there's 4 coaching calls that are included with that. Everyone, 100 people join. You're going to get all the program that we just described for you. You're going to get 4 coaching calls, and then you're going to get a completion designation. You're going to get a press release so you can let the world know that you completed this program. You have now made yourself unique in the marketplace. And then we're going to open the doors again. We're going to do 100, 100, 100, 100. We can't do more than that because it's a coaching program. We're not just selling Ginsu knives. So does that make sense, Julie?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I'm super excited for them. I put us back in that position. How would we have felt with some of these changes? And, through our 30-ish year career in real estate, we have gone through some of these changes, in various iterations. I remember when buyer agency was new, and then of course the housing crash, all these things. It's okay. Change is good. And this change is making everything far more professional. So let's say your worst case scenario is you have a great presentation that's completely logical. You've got lots of guarantees. And every now and then the buyer's going to unpre-qualify themselves. They're not so serious that they don't want to go with you. Well, you just got your time back. Now you can work with the next person that you meet with who really does take you seriously and their situation seriously. And they're going to be in contract with you this weekend. So I think that it is a shift. I think it's a great shift. I think it's going to really up the professionalism of the buyer side of the transaction, which has needed to be, I'm sorry that it had to be instigated upon everyone, but maybe that's what it took. But I think that this is a really good thing. And the presentation that you'll be able to learn how to deliver will give you the confidence that you're looking for. It'll give you great results. And it's not just your confidence, it's going to give even more confidence to the buyers that you're working with. And that's a great thing. And even the agents that you'll be dealing with on the other side will appreciate that. So I think this is a must-have for everyone. We've made it as simple as possible for you to execute on this. And we even, you were talking about the buyer scripts. We even have a section of a seller script. When the seller says to you, I don't have to pay a buyer agent anymore. There's a script of how to deal with that as well. So there's a lot of value to what we're bringing to you for this. And this is why we're having this kind of staggered approach, is because we do want to spend time with you and make sure that you have that confidence that you're looking for on each and every appointment that you go, forward through August and then beyond.
That's right. So if you want to get on the list to get early access to this program, just text the word buyer, B-U-Y-E-R to 47372. Text the word buyer, B-U-Y-E-R to 47372. Do this urgently. It puts you on a list. You'll get an invitation to join the program and earn the designation. And yeah, that's your way forward. And otherwise, I mean, honestly, there's going to be so much confusion. Julie just said, you're going to be a ethical real estate professional designated agent, right? You're going to be having to then educate the other agents in your marketplace. Let's just say you primarily work with buyers. I promise you, most of the listing agents out there are not going to know how to deal with these changes, not going to know the fact that there's going to be different ways that commission, can be paid. It can be paid through seller concessions. It can be financed as part of the transaction, all these different things that we're going to teach you in this program. Well, guess what, listeners, and guess what, viewers, you're going to have to also learn to educate your the listing agents on the buyer side, or if you're on the listing side, you're going to have to educate the buyer's agents on how to get deals together. That's what the next year or so, hopefully less, is going to be for all of us. It's going to be a lot of all hands on deck work, but we're here for you. We've got your backs. So I enjoyed our time today with Holly, Julie. Yeah, it was great. So in the meantime, guys, thank you for listening or viewing us. And thank you for, by the way, thank you for getting us over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. That was fantastic. If you're not subscribed, or if you're not, listening to us every day on our podcast, please do. We are very much boots on the ground, drilled down, helping you to keep your mindset in the right place so you can continue to be of service to others, and the others being your buyers and sellers. And thank you for allowing Julie and I to be of service to all of you. Have a fantastic day. Thanks, Julie.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.